Have you ever found yourself in a place where nothing makes sense anymore? Where the dreams you once chased no longer matter? Where the people you loved feel distant or gone entirely? Where the things that once brought you comfort, music, work, relationships, even your spiritual practices, suddenly feel hollow? If you're here, watching this, and these words resonate on a soul-deep level, you're not lost. You're not broken. You're not going crazy. You are likely going through something called the dark night of the soul. And let me tell you right now, this is not a punishment. It's a profound, sacred initiation, a spiritual passage so raw, so dismantling, and so transformative that it will change your entire existence. This video is for you. For the seeker who doesn't even know what they're seeking anymore. For the soul who has cried out to the universe in the silence of the night, begging for answers, begging for relief. For the person who has reached the end of what they know and stands trembling on the edge of something new, unknown, and terrifying. I want to meet you in that space. Not with cliches, not with spiritual bypassing, but with truth. Because this journey is real, and it is brutal. But it's also the beginning of something extraordinary. The dark night of the soul isn't just a poetic phrase. It's a spiritual unraveling. It's when everything you thought you were gets stripped away. When the mask of who you think you're supposed to be is torn off. When the identity you've built your life around starts to dissolve in front of your very eyes. And yes, it can feel like death. Not a physical one, but the death of your ego, your attachments, your illusions, and your old self. It can feel like you're dying inside, because in a very real way you are. The you that was built from conditioning, trauma, survival, and external validation, that version of you is collapsing. And it hurts. There's no sugarcoating that. It can feel like depression. It can feel like numbness, isolation, spiritual abandonment. It can feel like the universe has turned its back on you. You might question your faith, your worth, your sanity. You might lose friends. You might lose your job. You might lose everything that ever made you feel safe. But in that rubble, in the silence after the collapse, there is a sacred space, a blank canvas, a raw, stripped-down version of your soul. And what happens next is rebirth. But we'll get to that. In this video, we're going to walk through this process together. I'm going to explain what the dark night of the soul really is, where it comes from, why it happens, and most importantly, how to survive it. Because despite how hopeless it may feel right now, you will survive it. And you won't just survive, you will rise. You'll rise more aligned, more powerful, more connected, more whole than you've ever been in your life. But first, we have to talk about where you are now. Let's name what's happening to you. You're unraveling. You are waking up from an illusion you didn't know you were living in. And waking up hurts. No one talks about this part of spiritual awakening. The part where you don't feel enlightened or peaceful or free. The part where everything inside you is screaming, grieving, and letting go of what no longer fits. The part where you're on the floor at 2 a.m. wondering who you are without your titles, your roles, your relationships, your beliefs. You see, we're taught that awakening is beautiful, that it's filled with light and love and transcendence. But awakening is also destruction. It destroys everything false. It shatters everything superficial. It purges every illusion you've been holding on to. And that's not beautiful, it's terrifying. But that terror, that collapse, it's holy, because without the breaking, there can be no becoming. And I know right now you might not want to hear that. You just want the pain to stop. You want the confusion to go away. You want clarity, direction, something to hold on to. That's okay. I've been there. Many of us have. And the fact that you found this video means you're ready, not just to understand what you're going through, but to begin walking through it with consciousness. With awareness, with a flicker of faith that maybe, just maybe, this has meaning, that this has purpose. The dark night of the soul isn't random. It doesn't happen to everyone. It happens to those who are ready for true transformation, to those whose soul is ready to wake up, not just spiritually, but authentically, to live not from ego, but from essence, not from fear, but from truth. This is a spiritual initiation that mystics and sages have spoken about for centuries. St. John of the Cross coined the phrase during his own deep period of despair and divine disconnection. Buddhists call it the suffering of samsara. In mythology, it's the descent into the underworld. In Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, it's the abyss, the point where the hero faces death before resurrection. Every spiritual path has a version of it, because before enlightenment comes the void, and the void is where you are stripped bare, where you are emptied out, where everything dies so your true self can live. So no, you are not cursed. You are not lost. You are not a failure. You are being initiated. It may not feel like a blessing, but this is the moment your soul chose to awaken. This is the moment your soul decided it was ready for more truth, more freedom, more alignment, more love, more depth. And to get there, everything that isn't real has to fall away. That's the price of truth. That's the cost of authenticity. That's the threshold of transformation. I want you to know that the darkness you're walking through has meaning, even if you can't see it yet. It's part of a larger journey, one that has led countless souls to the deepest healing and highest purpose imaginable. But the beginning, it's chaos, it's heartbreak, it's surrender. And that's where we are right now. So take a breath. Place your hand on your heart. Feel into the space that hurts the most. And say this: I'm not breaking. I am becoming. In the next part of this video, we're going to break down exactly what the dark night of the soul is from both a spiritual and psychological perspective. We'll go into the signs, the triggers, and why your soul chose this moment to take you through it. But before we move on, let me say this one last thing. You are not alone. Even if it feels like no one understands you, even if it feels like the people around you can't relate, even if you're too afraid to talk about what's happening inside, I promise you, countless others have walked this road before you, and countless more will walk it after. And right now, I'm walking it with you. So stay with me, stay open, and let's walk through the dark together. Because there is light, and it's not out there somewhere. It's within you, waiting, rising, ready. What is the dark night of the soul? You may have heard the term dark night of the soul before, maybe in passing, maybe in a spiritual book, or perhaps on a post that resonated more than you expected. But what does it actually mean? Is it depression? Is it a spiritual crisis? Is it a breakdown? A phase? A punishment? Let's get clear. The dark night of the soul is not just a mood. It's not just having a bad day or feeling off. It is a complete spiritual collapse, a dismantling, a disintegration of everything you thought you were and everything you thought life was. It is a soul-level transformation, one that doesn't knock politely on your door. It kicks it down. To understand the depth of it, let's start with its origin. The roots of the term. The phrase dark night of the soul originates from the 16th century mystic St. John of the Cross, a Spanish Carmelite monk and poet. In his famous poem, La Noche Oscura del Alma, The Dark Night of the Soul, he described his own spiritual crisis, a deep period of abandonment, doubt, and inner desolation where he felt completely separated from God. In modern times, the term has expanded beyond religious tradition. It now describes a deep and personal crisis of meaning, identity, and purpose, especially for those on a spiritual path. It is the moment when the light goes out, when the divine, the universe, the guides, the signs, all fall silent. It's the sacred silence before the rebirth. But at the time, it just feels like everything is falling apart. So what is the dark night? Imagine you've spent your whole life building a house, brick by brick. This house is made from your beliefs, your identity, your roles, your routines, your culture, your traumas, your dreams. Everything you know about yourself lives inside this house. And one day, something happens. It could be a spiritual awakening, a loss, breakup, an illness, a deep existential insight, or absolutely nothing at all that you can explain. Suddenly, the foundation cracks. The roof collapses. The walls you leaned on crumble. And you're left standing in the rubble, disoriented, terrified, and exposed. That's the dark night. It's when everything that made sense no longer makes sense. When the ego, the part of you that says, I am this, I do that, I believe this, begins to dissolve. It's when your soul begins to awaken by first allowing everything false to fall away. What triggers it? There's no single trigger. It can happen after a traumatic event or seemingly out of nowhere. Sometimes it follows a spiritual high, like an awakening or kundalini rising. Sometimes it creeps in slowly, over months or years. It can be triggered by the loss of a loved one, a divorce or end of a significant relationship, a health crisis, a spiritual awakening that becomes too overwhelming, a burnout, disillusionment, or existential crisis, a sudden shift in awareness or consciousness, a feeling spiritually disconnected after years of belief. But no matter how it begins, the pattern is often the same. What once gave you life now feels dead. What once felt certain now feels meaningless. What once felt like you now feels like a mask. The symptoms, what it feels like. Let's get real about the experience. If you are in the dark night, you may feel some or all of the following. A profound sense of emptiness. A disconnection from your spiritual beliefs or practices. Emotional numbness or extreme emotional sensitivity. A loss of identity. You no longer know who you are or what you want. A deep existential dread, questioning the purpose of everything. A spiritual silence. You pray, but hear nothing back. Isolation. You feel misunderstood, even by those closest to you. A sudden breakdowns of relationships, careers, or dreams. A longing for something without knowing what that something is. One of the most confusing parts of the dark night is that it doesn't make logical sense. You may have everything you thought you wanted and still feel hollow. You may be doing all the right things, meditating, journaling, praying, and still feel abandoned. You may want to heal, but healing feels out of reach. And it's not just psychological. It's spiritual. It's your soul calling you inward, calling you home. But first, it must dismantle everything you've built on sand. The dark night versus depression. Now, let's take a moment to make an important distinction. The dark night of the soul can resemble depression, and it's important to take mental health seriously. If you're experiencing intense emotional distress, seeking professional support is never a weakness. It's a courageous step toward healing. However, the dark night goes beyond depression in key ways. There's often a spiritual or existential dimension, a sense that this suffering has meaning, even if you don't understand it yet. You may still feel connected to inner growth, even through the pain. There's often a soul-level awareness that something bigger is unfolding. It feels less like chemical imbalance and more like divine deconstruction. The two can absolutely coexist. But many people going through a dark night are misdiagnosed or misunderstood because our culture isn't built to support spiritual death and rebirth. But that's what the dark night is. It's a soul death before a soul rebirth. Why is it so painful? Because we're not just letting go of things. We're letting go of ourselves. The identity we've clung to for safety. The beliefs we built our worldview on. The relationships that validated our self-worth. The coping mechanisms that helped us survive. All of it is being taken away. Or more accurately, offered up to be surrendered. This surrender can feel like torture to the ego, but it's sacred medicine to the soul. The soul doesn't care about what's comfortable. It cares about what's true. And sometimes the only way to reveal truth is to strip everything else away. Is it supposed to happen? Yes. The dark night of the soul is not a detour. It's part of the path. In fact, almost every ancient tradition speaks about this moment. In Christian mysticism, it's the soul's purification before union with God. In Buddhism, it's the moment of intense suffering that precedes enlightenment. In mythology, it's the descent into the underworld, the hero's journey, where the protagonist must face death before resurrection. In alchemy, it's the Nigredo phase, the blackening before the gold emerges. The truth is, you cannot step into the light without first confronting the darkness. You cannot embody your higher self while still clinging to the false self. This is why the dark night is so vital. It is the initiation, the rite of passage, the shedding of the skin you've outgrown. Is it your fault? No, no. This is not your fault. This is not karma punishing you. This is not you failing at being spiritual. In fact, if you're experiencing this, it means you're ready. Ready for what? To meet your soul. Not the filtered version. Not the social media version. Not the spiritual ego version. Your real soul. The one that remembers who you are. The one that came here for a reason. The one that knows your power, your light, your truth. But to meet it, everything else must go. A sacred invitation. So what is the dark night of the soul? It is the most difficult, beautiful, terrifying, transformative gift your soul could ever receive. It is the space between no longer and not yet. It is the cocoon before the butterfly. It is the silence before the music. It is the void before the vision. It's not just something you survive. It's something that awakens you. And in the darkness, you begin to hear the whispers of truth, raw, pure, unfiltered truth. A voice inside begins to say, there is more. There is purpose in this pain. You are not who you thought you were. You are more. Keep going, moving forward. In the next part of this journey, we're going to explore exactly why the dark night of the soul happens, what spiritual purpose it serves, and how it's not the end of your life, but the beginning of a new one. Because once we understand the why, the suffering begins to take on meaning. And meaning is the light that leads us through the dark. So if this part of the journey resonated with you, take a moment to breathe. You are exactly where your soul needs you to be. This is not the end of your story. It's the sacred unraveling before the truth can rise. Let's keep going. Together. Why the dark night of the soul happens, the spiritual function. So now you know what the dark night of the soul feels like. You've seen its symptoms, its confusion, its intensity. But the question still echoes in the background. Why? Why would the universe allow such unbearable pain? Why would your soul drag you through this hidden, forbidden void where nothing makes sense anymore? The truth they don't want you to know is this. The dark night is not chaos. It's a sacred system upgrade. It's the soul's way of initiating you into a higher vibration, a new timeline, and a deeper level of consciousness. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. Prepared for your awakening. Prepared for your mission. Prepared for your divine remembrance. This is not a coincidence. You're watching this because your awakening has already begun. You see, we've been taught to believe that healing is pretty, that growth is clean, that spiritual evolution is some kind of glittering enlightenment experience filled with peace and soft candlelight. But the ancients knew the real truth. All rebirth begins in destruction. The dark night happens because your soul is trying to break free from the prison of your false identity. Everything that once felt safe, your relationships, your job, your beliefs, your emotional patterns, has reached its expiration date. It is no longer aligned with the frequency of who you are becoming. That's why everything begins to collapse. That's why your old life stops working. That's why even your spiritual practices can feel empty. It's not because you've failed. It's because your old self is no longer a match for your new vibration. The sacred collapse, ego death, and soul birth. Let's talk about the ego for a moment. Your ego isn't evil. It's a psychological structure designed to keep you safe in the 3D world. But the ego is based on illusion. It builds a sense of self from external sources, achievements, appearance, reputation, identity, control. And eventually, your soul says, enough. It pulls the thread on the illusion. It cracks the mirror you've been staring into. It begins to dismantle the simulation. Everything you thought was real is an illusion. The dark night is the sacred moment when the ego dies, and the soul begins to take the lead. It's messy, raw, terrifying, but it is the only way through the false self to the truth of who you are. This isn't just emotional pain. This is spiritual alchemy. The ancients spoke of this time. We are living in the prophecy. And right now, you are going through your own micro-prophecy, your inner shift, your private apocalypse, your energetic reset. Your soul chose this. Now here's where it gets mystical. The part most people avoid because it challenges the very fabric of what we've been taught. You are not here by accident. Your soul chose this moment. Before you were born into this timeline, your soul made agreements. It set intentions. It encoded your being with a mission. And embedded within that mission were activation points, moments that would crack your heart open and allow the light to flood in. The dark night is one of those points. It is the energetic portal through which your higher self begins to override the programming of the world. It is a cosmic initiation designed to break you out of the simulation and into remembrance. The window is closing. Don't miss this chance to align. Alignment is the soul's primary goal. And misalignment is what triggers the dark night. When you live too long out of sync with your soul's calling, your inner and outer realities begin to collide. The friction becomes unbearable. The system can no longer sustain the false frequency. And then crash, collapse, silence. But it's in that silence that your divine frequency begins to hum beneath the noise. It's in that void that your soul starts to broadcast a new signal. Shadow work and sacred integration. Here's another layer, the shadow. The dark night doesn't just remove what's no longer needed. It reveals what you've buried. Old trauma, unprocessed pain, repressed desires, unhealed wounds. These begin to surface, not to torture you, but to liberate you. Synchronicities are messages from beyond the veil. Your thoughts are shaping reality in ways you never imagined. Your frequency determines your reality. And your unconscious beliefs, the ones you picked up as a child and past lives from society, have been shaping your frequency all along. The dark night invites you to go into the shadows and unveil the hidden programming. This is where deep shadow work begins, not just healing the inner child, but confronting the false adult self you became just to survive. This is the sacred work. This is where light codes begin to activate in your DNA, where sacred geometry begins to form in your dreams, where ancient wisdom starts to speak in symbols, patterns, synchronicities. Everything you need is already within you, but until the false is cleared, the truth stays dormant. Your DNA is activating right now. The higher self begins to lead. Once the ego collapses and the shadows are exposed, your higher self steps forward. This is when things begin to feel surreal. You might start to notice synchronicities constantly. Angel numbers, animal messengers, dreams that feel like prophecies, people entering your life in strange timing. This is not random. This is not a game. The universe is trying to get your attention right now. Your soul is realigning you to a new timeline, a higher one. The people who fall away, they're not part of that frequency. The job that ends, it doesn't serve your soul's mission. The identity you lose, it was never truly you. And in its place, something ancient, sacred, and undeniably true begins to emerge. This is the energetic shift you've been craving without knowing it. This is the real you, the divine feminine, the divine masculine, unified within, whole, awake, ready. This is a sacred invitation, not a curse. So let's reframe this once and for all. You are not cursed. You are not broken. You are not being punished. You are being called. And yes, it hurts. Yes, it's lonely. Yes, it may feel like death. But that's because it is. The death of what isn't true. So that you can embody what is. A powerful shift is happening, and you must prepare. The signs have been in front of you all along. You just weren't ready to see them. This energy portal is shifting everything. This is your moment. The truth has been knocking for years. And now the door has been blown open. A new frequency, a new reality. You don't need to rebuild your old life. You need to align with a new one. The life your soul designed before your ego got involved. The version of you that vibrates in harmony with truth, love, and freedom. The sacred self who remembers. The dark night is the passage to that self. And it's not just for you. As you rise, your very vibration becomes a beacon to others. You shift the grid. You ripple into the collective field. You become a living activation for those around you. The ancient ones knew this secret. We are living in the prophecy, closing this chapter. So why does the dark night of the soul happen? Because your soul has outgrown the illusion. Because the light inside you has become too powerful to stay hidden. Because this timeline, this moment, is encoded with your ascension. Let yourself shed. Let yourself grieve. Let yourself transform. The caterpillar dissolves completely before it becomes the butterfly. There's no trace of its old body left. Only potential in motion. That's where you are right now. You are potential. You are energy. You are becoming. And in the next part of this journey, we'll talk about what this transformation feels like through real stories and emotional truths. You'll begin to see how your own path mirrors that of so many others, and how every breakdown is secretly a sacred breakthrough. If you're still here, still watching, don't look away. Because this is your awakening. Part 3, Personal Experiences and Emotional Truths. Let's pause for a moment. Everything we've talked about so far, the collapse of the ego, the sacred unraveling, the shadow surfacing, it's real, it's mystical, but it's also deeply, deeply human. This isn't just philosophy. This is an abstract theory. This is your life we're talking about. And I know how it feels because I've been there too. There was a time when I couldn't get out of bed. Not because I was physically sick, but because something invisible inside me had shattered. It was as if my soul had turned off the lights and walked out the door without leaving a note. I remember staring at the ceiling for hours, unable to move. Not even tears could find their way out anymore. I felt like I had been erased. And that's the best word I can use to describe it. Erased. Not destroyed, not broken, just gone. Like the me I had always known had simply vanished. Everything you thought was real is an illusion. You are not here by accident. Your soul chose this moment. When the dark night began for me, I had no words for it. I didn't know what awakening meant. I wasn't reading esoteric books or channeling cosmic energy. I was just in pain. I thought something was wrong with me. I thought I had failed. I thought I was too weak to handle life. But looking back now, that moment was a sacred initiation. It was the energetic portal through which my soul began to reclaim the truth. The breakdown before the breakthrough. One of the hidden secrets of this journey is that almost everyone who awakens, truly awakens, goes through this phase. You'll hear whispers of it in the stories of sages, mystics, artists, and healers. They don't always call it the dark night, but you'll hear the same energetic blueprint. The loss, the void, the surrender, the reemergence. I've spoken to people who lost everything in a matter of weeks. Careers vanished. Marriages ended. Their health broke down. They described it as if life had pulled the rug out from under them, and yet somehow deep down, they knew something mystical was happening. This is not a coincidence. Your awakening has already begun. The universe is trying to get your attention right now. A powerful shift is happening, and you must prepare. And it's that deep knowing, however faint, that gets you through. Even when your mind screams, "This is wrong," something else, a quiet whisper from your soul says, "Stay. Keep going. Don't turn back." Emotional truth. It hurts like hell. Let's be honest. The dark night of the soul isn't poetic when you're in it. It's not aesthetic. It's not hashtag ascension goals. It's crying in the shower because you don't know who you are anymore. It's feeling like a stranger in your own body. It's watching your dreams dissolve and having no idea what will take their place. You are living in a simulation, and it's starting to crack. The signs have been in front of you all along. You just weren't ready to see them. Sometimes it's subtle, like the slow erosion of passion. Other times it's violent, a tower collapsing overnight. But in every case, it feels existential. Because it is. You're not just grieving a person or a job, you're grieving a version of yourself that no longer exists. And no one teaches us how to grieve ourselves. No one teaches us how to sit in the void, how to let go of everything without knowing what's next, how to become nothing so we can be reborn as everything. Your pain is not ordinary, it's sacred. There's a reason you feel things so deeply. There's a reason you break open in ways others can't understand. You are not weak, you are wired to awaken. You are sensitive to truth. You carry ancient memories in your bones. You walk with timelines that stretch beyond this life. The ancient ones knew this secret. We are living in the prophecy. Your DNA is activating right now. When your soul signed up for this incarnation, it didn't come for comfort. It came for completion. It came to transmute pain into power, to collapse outdated timelines, to awaken light codes buried beneath lifetimes of survival. You are not here to fit in. You are here to disrupt the illusion. And to do that, you had to experience it firsthand. You are not alone in the void. Maybe you've never said it out loud, but I know you've whispered it in your own way. I feel like I'm disappearing. I don't know what's real anymore. Why do I feel like I'm losing my mind? I don't know who I am. Oh, everything hurts. These are not signs of failure. These are signs of initiation. What if I told you reality is not what it seems? You are not broken. You are becoming. Your frequency determines your reality. The dark night strips away the noise so you can finally hear the voice within, the real one. Not the programmed voice of fear, but the eternal whisper of truth. This is the resonance you've been searching for. This is why the false life couldn't satisfy you. This is why the relationships didn't last. This is why the dreams didn't land. Because your soul has been calling you home. You're not just healing yourself, you're healing lineages. Let me share something profound I've seen time and time again. People who walk through the dark night aren't just awakening for themselves. They are clearing generations of suppressed energy. They are dissolving karmic loops that have played out for centuries. They are unlocking quantum healing that ripples through timelines. Sacred geometry reveals the hidden patterns of existence. You are shifting not just your life, but the collective frequency. This energy portal is shifting everything. When you rise, you don't just rise alone. You rise on behalf of every ancestor who was silenced. You rise for every version of yourself that was denied. That's why it's so hard. Because what you're doing is extraordinary. And the world doesn't yet know how to honor that kind of inner work. But I see you, and I honor the sacred fire you've walked through. A moment of reflection. Take a breath. Feel into your body. Notice the ache, the heaviness, the vibration behind your ribs. That is the place where the sacred work is happening. That is the altar. That is the temple. That is the quantum field where your soul is reassembling itself. Your thoughts are shaping reality in ways you never imagined. Synchronicities are messages from beyond the veil. You are not here by accident. Your soul chose this moment. Everything that's been taken away, everything that's been torn down, everything that's been silenced, it's all creating space. Sacred space. Space for the divine to flow through you, not just into you. Because you are not a seeker anymore. You are becoming the source. This part of your story, this dark, messy, invisible part, matters. Your pain is not just pain. Your grief is not just grief. Your collapse is not just collapse. It is the unveiling. It is the sacred shift. It is the prophecy in motion. And you're not alone. If this part of the journey resonated with you, share your story below. Even just a sentence. There is deep power in being witnessed, even through a screen. And in the next part, we're going to take this even further into the practical, mystical, grounded ways to navigate the dark night and actually walk through it, step by step. Because you don't have to be lost in this forever. The light is not gone. It's just being reborn inside of you. How to navigate the dark night of the soul, the sacred act of surrender. If there's one word whispered again and again by those who've made it through the dark night, it's this: surrender. But what does that actually mean? Most people hear surrender and immediately think of giving up, collapsing, being weak, letting life walk all over you. That's not surrender. Real surrender is not passive. It's not defeat. It's not weakness. It's power. The sacred kind. The quantum kind. The kind that unlocks dimensions hidden from ordinary perception. Surrender is a mystical portal. A vibrational shift. A gateway to alignment. And in the dark night of the soul, it's not just helpful, it's essential. You can try to fight your way out. You can try to reason, resist, or spiritual bypass your way through it. But nothing changes until you surrender. Let's break this down through multiple lenses so you can understand not just why surrender is necessary, but how to practice it in real, grounded ways. Psychological and neuroscientific perspective. Your brain is not designed to love uncertainty. It craves control, familiarity, prediction. This is the work of the prefrontal cortex, constantly trying to maintain a sense of order and logic. In the dark night of the soul, your reality collapses, and your nervous system interprets this as danger. Cortisol spikes. Your amygdala lights up. Fight or flight is activated. Your brain wants to do something. Solve the problem, fix the pain, escape the void. But here's the paradox. The dark night isn't a problem to solve, it's an experience to pass through. It's a liminal state, a sacred pause between identities. And here's where neuroscience gets fascinating. When you consciously shift from resistance to acceptance, your brain chemistry changes. The default mode network quiets. The parasympathetic nervous system turns on. You move from survival mode into restoration, integration, healing. In other words, surrender doesn't weaken the brain. It rewires it. It lowers stress hormones. It regulates the heart. It reconnects you with your body's innate intelligence. This isn't spiritual fluff. This is biology responding to a mystical decision. Spiritual and mystical context. Now let's step into the mystical. In nearly every esoteric tradition, from Taoism to Gnosticism, from Hermeticism to Hinduism, there is a sacred teaching. Let go. Release. Die before you die. The ancient sages knew that the moment of deepest transformation was not when you figured it out, but when you stopped trying to. The Tao says, by letting go, all things are done. Buddha's path to enlightenment began when he stopped striving and simply sat in stillness. Even in modern energy work and quantum healing, practitioners know. When you resist a frequency, it becomes denser. When you accept it without judgment, it begins to dissolve. Surrender is not checking out, it's tuning in. This energy portal is shifting everything. The signs have been in front of you all along. You just weren't ready to see them. And once you finally stop resisting the dark night, something subtle happens. You begin to feel held. not by logic, not by certainty, but by a sacred intelligence far beyond the mind. Some call it the higher self, others God, others source, the universe, the divine matrix. But its frequency is unmistakable. Stillness, spaciousness, awareness, compassion. You finally realize the universe is not trying to hurt me. It's trying to unmake who I am not, so I can remember who I truly am. Now let's step even deeper into sacred texts and religious practices. In Christianity, the surrender of Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane is the ultimate dark night. He weeps, alone, betrayed, and says, "Not my will, but thine be done." It is in this surrender that resurrection becomes possible. Death must precede rebirth. In Islam, the very word Islam means submission, surrender to the will of God, not in fear, but in trust. In Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion, surrender is the highest spiritual path, letting go of control and offering everything, pain, desire, joy, at the feet of the divine. In Judaism, the mystics speak of Bittul, the nullification of the self so one may merge with the infinite. Even in Buddhism, where the concept of no self dissolves egoic control, enlightenment only arises through full letting go. Across traditions, the message is universal. Surrender is not the end of the path. Surrender is the path. How to practice surrender? Okay, but how do you actually do it? Let's talk about the embodied practice of surrender, especially when you're in the middle of a breakdown and everything feels like it's spiraling. Here are 5 key practices. 1. Name the resistance. Don't bypass it. Say it out loud or write it down. I don't want to feel this. I hate that I'm lost. I'm afraid nothing will get better. Once you name it, you shift it. Resistance loses its grip when you give it compassionate awareness. 2. Pause all forcing. Stop trying to fix your vibration. Stop trying to manifest your way out. Stop looking for the perfect healing tool. For one moment, just be. Let yourself fall apart without rushing to be whole again. 3. Breathe into the body. Close your eyes. Place a hand on your chest or stomach. Inhale slowly. Exhale slower. You're not breathing just to relax. You're breathing to become present. Your body is the sacred altar where surrender happens, not the mind. 4. Use sacred language. Speak words that recalibrate your frequency. I trust this collapse is sacred. I surrender to what I don't understand yet. I am safe even here. I release the need to control. Everything not meant for me is dissolving. I let go with love. These are not affirmations. They are declarations, coded vibrations that align your inner field to truth. 5. Let the mystery be enough. You don't need the full map. You don't need proof or a sign every day. You don't need to know what comes next. You just need to know this. This moment is part of your prophecy. You are not being erased. You are being rewritten. Your DNA is activating right now. Your frequency determines your reality. And when you truly surrender, not with your words but with your nervous system, you feel it. Not clarity, not answers, but peace. A sacred neutrality. A quiet knowing that you don't need to swim, because you are already being carried. Surrender is the threshold of miracles. If you take away one truth from this entire video, let it be this. Surrender is not where your power ends. It's where your true power begins. It is the point where the false self crumbles and the divine self begins to rise. Not because you figured it all out, but because you finally got out of the way. The truth they don't want you to know is that letting go is the most potent spiritual technology on earth. You don't need to fight this anymore. You don't need to decode every emotion or perfect your healing. You just need to open, breathe, and allow. That's how the butterfly emerges from the cocoon. That's how the phoenix rises from the ashes. That's how you remember that you were never broken, just becoming. Closing this chapter. So if you're watching this and you're still in the thick of it, if you feel lost, numb, afraid, let go. Let it fall apart. Let the timeline collapse. Let the false identities burn. And in the stillness that follows, listen. Because there's a new voice rising within you. A new self forming in the space where the old one died. A sacred vibration. A mystical unfolding. Divine truth. And it begins with surrender. Signs are coming out of the dark night of the soul. If you're watching this and you've made it this far, take a moment. Close your eyes. Put your hand over your heart. Take a deep breath in and exhale slowly. Because this moment matters. The very fact that you're still here, watching, searching, listening, means something profound. You're beginning to rise. The darkness is not eternal. The void is not your home. And while it may not feel like light is flooding back in just yet, something within you has already shifted. Something ancient. Something sacred. A powerful shift is happening, and you must prepare. The universe is trying to get your attention right now. You are not broken. You are awakening. You are not at the end. You are at the threshold. Let's explore what that looks like, what it feels like when the dark night of the soul begins to loosen its grip and your true self starts to emerge. You no longer resist the darkness. One of the earliest signs of healing isn't that the pain is gone. It's that you stop fighting it. You no longer wrestle with the void. You stop demanding answers from the universe. You start to trust the silence, even if you don't understand it yet. This is the essence of surrender, turning into strength. You've passed through the fire, and instead of turning back, you now stand still within it, unafraid. That alone is a monumental energetic shift. The signs have been in front of you all along. You just weren't ready to see them. This energy portal is shifting everything. You are not here by accident. Your soul chose this moment. You begin to feel peace, not because the external world is fixed, but because your internal world has finally surrendered to the sacred unknown. A subtle return of meaning. The dark night steals meaning from everything. Books feel empty. Music falls flat. Conversations seem hollow. Even spiritual practices can feel like going through the motions. But slowly, subtly, you begin to feel flickers of connection again. You hear a lyric, and it moves something inside you. You watch the sun rise, and it brings a tear to your eye. You speak a truth aloud, and it feels real, not forced. These are signs of soul remembrance, not fireworks, light codes, not explanations, synchronicities, not logical proof, sacred resonance. Your thoughts are shaping reality in ways you never imagined. Your frequency determines your reality. Where there was once numbness, there is now presence. Where there was apathy, there is curiosity. Where there was silence, there is a whisper of joy. This is not coincidence. This is resurrection. Your nervous system begins to relax. The body is a holy messenger. And when the soul begins to stabilize after a long period of collapse, your body will tell you before your mind ever does. You begin to breathe deeper. You sleep a little easier. Your heart feels less heavy. There's still sadness. There's still uncertainty. But the edge of the panic is gone. You are no longer trapped in survival mode. You are stepping into regulation, safety, and energetic coherence. And this is key, because when your nervous system relaxes, your intuition reactivates. Suddenly, you can feel again, sense again, navigate again. This isn't just recovery. This is soul realignment. New desires begin to emerge. You may not know exactly who you are yet, but you're beginning to sense who you're not. You no longer crave validation from the places that once fed your ego. You no longer want to perform, prove, or please. You begin to hunger for what feels true, simple, real. New ideas emerge. New callings whisper. Sometimes it's subtle, a book you want to read, a place you want to visit, a project you feel drawn to. Other times it's wild, a vision of a new life, a dream you never gave yourself permission to want. The ancient ones knew this secret. We are living in the prophecy. These desires are not random. They are soul codes awakening. They are memories of your mission rising through the rubble. Follow them, even if they don't make sense. They are not detours. They are divine breadcrumbs placed just for you. You attract people who reflect your becoming. During the darkest phases, isolation is almost inevitable. You feel cut off from everyone, family, friends, even your spiritual community. But as you begin to rise in frequency, you may notice something different. New people begin to appear. They feel aligned, open, deep. You don't need to explain yourself. They recognize your energy instantly. They speak a language of frequency, not just words. And sometimes it's not people. It's teachers, books, synchronicities. You feel guided again, not by force, but by flow. Synchronicities are messages from beyond the veil. This is not a coincidence. You're seeing this for a reason. You begin to walk in a kind of harmony, not yet steady, but aware. You sense that the universe isn't just random chaos. It's an alive intelligence co-creating with you. And now that your false self has died, you're finally ready to partner with it. You begin to trust the process. Perhaps the most powerful sign of all is this. You no longer need to rush the ending. You're not grasping for escape anymore. You're not demanding clarity before you move forward. You're okay with the in-between. What if I told you reality is not what it seems? Everything you thought was real is an illusion. You no longer crave answers. You crave alignment. You no longer seek safety and certainty. You seek truth, even when it's wild and unpredictable. You're not healed. You're not enlightened. But you are available. Available to life. Available to spirit. Available to your next becoming. That is everything. That is the turning point. That is the sign you are no longer in the dark night. You are emerging. The shift has already begun. You may still have hard days. You may still weep. You may still fall silent. But there's a root now, an anchor. A divine stability forming at your core. The simulation is cracking. The veil is thinning. Your soul is remembering its blueprint. And soon you will rise fully. This is the real truth. The darkness didn't destroy you. It revealed you. You were never lost. You were always on the path. You are not healing. You are becoming whole. Closing this chapter. If any of these signs are appearing in your life, even faintly, then you are already shifting. You are not waiting for the light. You are becoming it. You have crossed the threshold. The new timeline is unfolding. Your divine frequency is stabilizing. And the next chapter is calling. In the next part, we'll talk about the gift of the dark night, the soul treasures you take with you after the collapse, the mystical wisdom, the new self, the clarity, the truth. But for now, take a moment. Place your hand over your heart. Whisper to yourself, I'm coming home to who I really am. I'm no longer afraid of the dark. The dawn is here, and it begins with me. Beautiful. We now enter the final chapter of this transformational journey. Closing this chapter. If any of these signs are appearing in your life, even faintly, then you are already shifting. You are not waiting for the light. You are becoming it. You have crossed the threshold. The new timeline is unfolding. Your divine frequency is stabilizing. And the next chapter is calling. In the next part, we'll talk about the gift of the dark night, the soul treasures you take with you after the collapse, the mystical wisdom, the new self, the clarity, the truth. But for now, take a moment. Place your hand over your heart. Whisper to yourself, I'm coming home to who I really am. I'm no longer afraid of the dark. The dawn is here, and it begins with me. Beautiful. We now enter the final chapter of this transformational journey. Final words. The prophecy was always you. So if you're watching this and you've come this far, know this. The dark night was not random. It was not meaningless. It was not a curse. It was your ascension in disguise. And everything you have now, clarity, peace, purpose, presence, was earned in the deepest chambers of your soul. This is not just healing. This is prophecy unfolding. You are no longer lost. You are encoded with light. The window is open. Walk through it. You are free now. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer afraid to be real. And that changes everything. If you've watched this far, you've already begun your return. You're not the person who entered the dark night. You're more aware, more honest, more aligned. You're not broken. You're becoming. This wasn't an ending. It was an activation. Now, it's time to walk forward. Here are 3 practical things you can do right now. 1, journal your awakening. Write about who you are now. What's shifted? What no longer fits? What truths have emerged? Let the new version of you speak clearly, without editing. 2, simplify your life. Remove what no longer aligns. Whether it's a habit, a belief, a relationship, or a daily routine, release what drains your energy. Lighten your field. 3, create one soul-aligned habit. Maybe it's morning silence. Maybe it's grounding in nature. Maybe it's choosing truth over people-pleasing. Whatever it is, start living like the new version of you is already here. If this series spoke to you, comment below. I'm rising. Let that be your anchor, your declaration, your turning point. And don't forget to subscribe if you want more sacred tools, guidance, and soul-aligned truths for what comes next. You've walked through the dark. Now rise in the light, fully, unapologetically.